Hello, everybody. I always get like I'm always thinking of The Simpsons. And so when I say hello, everybody, I'm not going to do a Simpsons voice, but I'm always thinking of The Simpsons stuff. So, hopefully you guys had a nice, weekend. Mine was pretty relaxed. Actually, one of my other techs decided to take the on-call for me because he wanted some extra hours. I don't know if that quite worked out for him because I don't think we really had too many calls over the weekend, but it was still kind of cool that he took that for me. So, I see there's quite a few people in the chat, and as you guys post questions, I will definitely try to get to them. As usual, please try to put them in caps lock if you guys could, please. And that way myself and Justin can try to get to them for you guys. So, cool, right on. I'm looking down at my phone because Justin, the moderator, always texts me and lets me know when things are working out, how the audio is going and stuff. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Justin. Got a few... It's actually, I want to apologize too, because guys, for those of you that have been sending me emails and YouTube comments, I'm like way behind on them. All of a sudden recently, I just got like a crap ton of them and I haven't been able to catch up. I really appreciate the support that I got from a lot of you guys on the little project that my wife and I were working on, where we were kind of going into the how we deal with the HVAC Life video series. That was pretty cool. I really appreciated that. I didn't know how well that was going to turn out. Obviously, you guys know I'm not super crazy on editing my videos. You know, I'm kind of rough around the edges with my stuff, but I just kind of like to be straight and to the point. So, you know, I apologize. It's not some fancy polished thing with introductions and all kinds of stuff like that and real high video production, but I think we kind of get to the point. So, you know, and we actually just recorded another episode, that will come out this week on Wednesday. Where we talk about some other stuff. So, and we're going to kind of continue that until it peters off and people don't like it. I just want to get some information out there. I really want to get to the mental health stuff. And speaking of mental health, for those of you guys that don't know, forgive me, I do not know the gentleman's name. There's a popular YouTuber out there that I recently found out just passed away. And at least the articles that I've read and everything basically said that he had committed suicide. And, you know, I really can't stress enough that mental health is no joke, guys. You got to talk to people. You got to get that stuff out. You can't keep stuff inside. When people are struggling, you know, I know it from experience, not the suicide part, but I mean, I know that I battled with mental health, you know, a little bit too. And mine was not serious by far. Mine was little, very minor. But, you know, that stuff can lead to problems. So you guys need to take care of that. If you've got anxiety, you've got depression, talk to someone, okay? There's nothing wrong with talking to a doctor. And I was one of those people that felt, you know, like I really didn't need to talk to a doctor about my feelings and all that stuff. But you know what? It really did help me and got some stuff out that I needed to get out and helped me to address and made me a better person. So for those of you that are dealing with mental health issues, that have got anxiety, depression, go talk to a doctor, guys. Talk to someone. Even if you can't talk to a doctor, talk to a family member, talk to someone, just get it out. Okay. You don't want the worst case scenario to happen. You don't want to, you know, do anything bad. You don't want to regret anything. So, you know, just, I'm going to get off that rant, but I just kind of wanted to get that out there. So, so yeah, I really wanted to say where I started with that was I really wanted to say thank you very much for all the support that you guys gave on that video where I was, doing it with my wife. And, you know, I think it's working out pretty good. So let's see where it continues to go. So at the same time, I've had a couple other videos that I've released. And again, I just haven't been able to really get to the comments. You know, I try to answer almost all the comments as much as possible, but for some reason, you guys are just blowing me up lately with like too many. And what happened was there was 2 videos where I just wasn't able to get to them. And then now I'm way behind and it's just kind of overwhelming, but I will get to them. You know, and don't hesitate if you guys ask me questions via emails, because there's a few emails out there too that, you know, if I showed you my inbox, it's not huge, but, you know, I definitely I'll put like a little star next to certain emails that I really, really want to take some time and answer. And there's probably 5 or 6 of those right now that I need to get to. So don't hesitate to send me another message. You're not going to make me upset. You know, usually, even if I don't have a proper answer for your email, I'll usually acknowledge it and send you a message saying, hey, I really don't know how to address this or something. So if you don't get a response from me, don't hesitate to send another email and I'll definitely try to get to that. So, yeah, the Tito 209. I definitely am going to talk about the mental health and stress of refrigeration techs. It's insane. Okay. Like I said, the video series that I'm doing with my wife, we're addressing that, and I'm going to tell you guys my stories. So, and just kind of tell you how we learn to deal with things. And that's the whole point of the video series that I'm doing with my wife. And again, for those of you that are just coming in, I'm addressing the new video series that I started called How We Live with HVAC Our Life. And it's not, and just to clarify, guys, that's not going to be a replacement for my normal technical videos, okay? When I do release the video with my wife, the series, you know, I'll do a couple different parts. It'll be a bonus video, so it's not going to take away from my normal technical stuff, okay? So, but like I said, there'll be a new one released this Wednesday, so you guys should see that in your feeds once it pops up, so... I'm going to go ahead and hit this question real quick. Hans Peterson, you said, what would I put in a toolkit for an apprentice? You know, that's... I can talk about a few things right now, but I think that's more suited for me to make an actual produced video about that, and I can talk about the basic tools. And I will. I've done like a tool bag video before, but I've been thinking about doing a more updated one just because some people ask me, and it's like, sometimes I remember in my head, like, yeah, I've made that video, go find it. But YouTube is kind of difficult for finding videos. It'd be really nice if they had like a search feature, or it was easier to search for things, I should say. So I realized that some of the videos that I've made maybe get lost in the shuffle because there's hundreds of them. And so I'll start to redo some of those videos and kind of update them on the different tools. But I mean, for the most part, you know, for an apprentice, it's going to be basic tools. You know, I have an apprentice riding with me right now, and, you know, it's taking him some time to kind of realize, like, I like to show him, you know, or I tell him to pay attention to what's in my tool bag. You know, and I keep things in my tool bag that I use. And if I don't use it, I take it out of my bag. So I think the more important thing that I would say, as far as an apprentice goes, is I would rather say what tools you don't need. Okay. Because a lot of times when you have an apprentice come with you, he comes with a toolbox in his bag, right? Whether it be a bucket or a backpack or whatever. And it's like, hey, bro, you're not going to need shears. You know, hey, bro, you're not going to need a hammer. Like, we don't use those things in our tool bags, okay? It's okay to have a hammer or some shears in your van, but you don't need to carry it with you every day. I think that a lot of times people, especially apprentices and new guys, they get excited because, you know, it took a lot for them to be able to buy those tools, and I get it. I'm a tool whore. I love having tools, but, you know, they tend to carry things that they'll never use, or they buy the fancy stuff. One thing that I like to tell the guys that I work with is, you know, I don't, for the most part, I mean, there's some exceptions, but I don't buy tools that I can't beat the crap out of, okay? And you guys would probably be sickened, you know, if you saw me taking my channel locks and using them as a hammer, but I can't carry a hammer in my bag. It's too heavy. So I have a set of lineman pliers and a set of channel locks, and those things act as hammers too. I prefer to use my lineman pliers because the channel locks, if you hit them in the wrong spot, they'll get stuck. But, you know, that's also why I don't buy some of the Knipex tools, because they're very, very nice and I really like them. I see people using them, but I need to be able to use my tools and beat the crap out of them. And, you know, the Knipex ones, they're so light that I wouldn't be able to use those channel lock style tools as a, you know, as a hammer, different things. Same thing with my crescent wrenches. I'll use them as a hammer too. You know, screwdrivers and stuff like that. So as far as an apprentice goes, I'd be cautious about buying, you know, really fancy, something that I really see happen all the time. And I'm even guilty of it sometimes too, is carrying like a really nice Klein HVAC 11-in-1, you know, because if you lose one of those bits, that thing's pretty much useless. And then you have a $20 screwdriver, $25, you know, 11-in-1 screwdriver that's missing a bit, and that sucks. And yes, you can order them, but you know how difficult it is to sit down and try to order something online. So, but I will definitely do something for an apprentice and kind of go through the things that you use. And, you know, but I think it's more important, like I said, to talk to an apprentice about what tools he doesn't need, because they tend to bring way too much, you know. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate that you have some hand-me-down tools that your grandfather gave you, and, you know, they lasted him forever, but some of those tools are a little outdated and a little too heavy. So, you know, sometimes it's smart to get some more efficient, newer tools that will last you a while and, you know, that don't weigh 55 pounds for a crescent wrench. I had a guy one time that used to carry a crescent wrench that was for an iron worker, and it had a, you know, what do you want to call, like for lining up iron beams, you know, like a point on the end. And it's like, dude, what are you carrying that thing for? You're going to poke your eye out with that thing, you know? It's going to pop off a nut one time and hit you in the face. And it was just kind of silly. Like, his grandfather gave it to him and he loved it. It was kind of a running joke at the company is that he had, you know, his grandfather's tools. And again, I realize that nobody, you know, everybody can't afford to go buy the most expensive tools, but at the same time, you got to be practical. You know, you're going to hurt yourself as an apprentice or a new guy carrying around these bags that weigh tons of weight, you know? And, you know, I'm not talking crap about heavy bags because I carry a Vito backpack because I choose to, but, you know, I strategically have the tools that I need in it. So, and they're pretty basic. So, but, you know, anyways. All right, I'm going to go down here and see what else we got going on here. Guys, if I miss some of your stuff, make sure you guys put it down in the chat again, and I'll try to get to it. Make sure you try to keep it in caps lock, too. Yeah, that's another thing. I just kind of scrolled through the chat, and I saw it. Another thing someone pointed out is that you're going to lose tools like crazy, too, and that is true. You are going to lose tools. You have to accept that. For instance, when I go to the supply house and I buy digital thermometers, you know, the little pocket thermometers, I'm not going to joke with you. I mean, I'm going to be serious with you. You know, I buy probably 5 or 6 at a time. And yeah, they're $20 each, but you know, there's nothing worse than not having the thermometer that you need when you need it. Okay. So I buy, you know, 5 or 6 of them, and usually the supply house gives you a deal or something like that for buying that many. But I mean, I do because those are high loss items. And the same thing, I carry a Klein 11-in-1 with me right now because I'm pretty careful about using it and not losing the bits. And the fact that if I do lose a bit, it's on me. But as a new guy or an apprentice, I wouldn't suggest you carrying those really expensive 11-in-1s. I would highly suggest that you carry, you know, just the $4 or $5 orange 4-in-1 or 6-in-1 from Home Depot, you know, like, and that way, if you lose it, it's not that big of a deal. But something like that too, I carry an extra screwdriver or 2 in my van. Me personally, I have like a little toolbox that I have, and I carry extra crescent wrenches, extra service wrenches, extra set of channel locks. I actually have a bigger set of channel locks, you know, so there's quite a few extras that I carry. And I personally have 3 sets of gauges, 2 of them that I use regularly, and then one of them's a backup. Actually, I should say 2 sets of gauges. I have a new set of S-mans and an old set of S-mans, and then I have some analog stubbies, or not analog, but you know, just normal yellow jacket compound gauges that have just little fittings on them. And then that way I can use those on little R290 regions and whatnot if I don't want to use like my field piece probes, which I carry field piece probes with me too. So, but you know, there's definitely some stuff, and you got to be cautious. You know, something that I run into when I work with other people. So I have 2 guys that when I'm working with them, I often will have them help me while I'm finishing something up. They'll go load my van up with my tools. And what I tend to find is when I work with other people and I let them put my tools away, my tools get lost. Because for me, I'm going to give you an example. Recently went to go grab my torches out of my van, and they had the oxygen and acetylene was completely empty. And it's like, hey, what happened here? Because I know we just used these 3 days ago and these things were full, you know? And what I noticed was that the valves on the end of the tanks were open. And I talked to the guy that I'm working with, and I said, hey, look, here's the deal. When I put my tools away, I have a routine that I follow. You know, I open the torches up. I put my striker in there, my sandpaper in there. I don't use a service wrench very much anymore, but I used to put a service wrench in there, you know, and I had everything in there, and I check all that. Then I'd wind them up the special way that I wind them up. Then I would turn them off and then bleed the gas out of the hoses. Well, what was happening was I was giving them to them, and I was making an assumption, again, making an ass out of myself, because I assumed they were going to follow the same procedure, but not necessarily. They just put them away. Well, my valve must have got cracked when it was moving, and, you know, the oxygen and acetylene completely leaked out of the torches. So that sucks. It's stuff like that. And that would be another example of something that I would give advice to an apprentice is there's a lot that goes into paying attention who you're working with and how they organize their tools and where they keep them, and pay attention. Don't just sit there on your phone all day long and not paying attention. You know, watch what they're doing. When you get out of the van, you know, watch as I grab my torches. You see that whenever I grab my torches, I grab my kneeling pad or whatever I do, you know, where I grab a spray bottle and some towels, because that's going to improve the way that you work too, as an apprentice or as a helper, or even just another guy that's working with someone, you know, paying attention to that kind of stuff. I'm kind of going off on a rant about apprentices and different things, but another thing I'm going to give like serious advice to is, you know, it's very interesting because I find that a lot of people don't know how to get anywhere without navigation these days. Me, I guess it's hard because I came from a time when we were still using Thomas guides and map books. Okay. And then at that time, we had something called MapQuest. MapQuest was where we would print out directions to something the night before. That was revolutionary when we got MapQuest, right? Because we didn't have GPS on our phones yet or anything like that. The first GPSs that came out were insanely expensive. But anyways, where I'm going at with this is I have, people that I've had in the past that couldn't navigate anywhere without a GPS, or they'd end up, I'm not joking with you, the GPS would send them in the complete wrong direction, and it's like, hey, don't you pay attention? He's been there 4 times before, but to them, they just follow the navigation and don't pay attention to what they're doing. They're in a zone and just not even paying attention. Number one, that's dangerous, because if you can't pay attention to where you're going and your surroundings, then obviously you're not paying attention to how you're driving too. But, you need to be observant. You need to pay attention. And I've always been a person that even when I was a kid, once I got my driver's license, I knew how to get everywhere, because when I sat in the car, I would always look and I'd recognize freeways and I'd recognize, oh, this is the exit that I go here. And so, but that's a really, really big thing, especially for, apprentices and new guys, is, paying attention to where you're going. And if you're sitting in that passenger seat, sometimes I might have an apprentice drive, but let's say he's sitting in the passenger seat just because I like to drive myself. Instead of him staring at his phone all day long, he needs to pay attention to where we're going. So that way, he's going to go to that job with me 3-4 times. And then, eventually he might get his own van, and then he's going to be required to go there, and he's going to be like, how do I get there? Or, oh, the navigation told me to go the wrong way. I'm sorry. I ended up in Hemet and I was supposed to be in San Diego, or whatever, somewhere silly like that. But that stuff has happened and it's ridiculous. So, you guys need to be more observant when you're with people and rely less on technology. I mean, technology is a great thing, and I'm going to talk about how technology helps us here in a little while too. But you need to pay attention to where you're driving and, to your surroundings. Okay. Hell yeah. Kind of going in here and reading the comments here, guys. Okay. What are the symptoms of moisture in the system and how to diagnose it? Ralph. Wow, Ralph, there's a lot of stuff. Obviously, when you're testing for acid in the system, that's what a liquid line sight glass is for. That's one thing that we can do to prevent moisture. If you have a system that has a lot of refrigerant leaks, you need to really be skeptical on whether or not there's a lot of moisture in that system. Let's hope that you have proper filter dryers in there, because, a dryer plugging up is going to be a great sign of moisture in the system. And moisture can be a hard thing to find before it does its damage. Unfortunately, unless, it's very hard to find. But I mean, if you were doing routine acid tests on a system, that would be a great way to find moisture. But other than that, it's going to be difficult. I mean, unless you have a catastrophic event like a grounded out compressor or something, moisture can be a definite difficult thing to find. So unfortunately, with the way that people do preventative maintenance these days, or the lack of preventative maintenance that seems to be the trend, we tend to have more problems. And then also people not following proper refrigeration practices, vacuuming the system down, making sure you're purging your hoses before you blast them, that refrigerant in that has a lot of air in the lines and different things. Okay. I'd be glad to talk a little bit more about that, Ralph, if you want to send me an email. So yeah, I am in rant mode, Sean. All right. Okay. Yeah, Justin, same thing, dude. I mean, I get it. Sometimes it's kind of boring for a helper, but, and I'm not mad at the guy that's riding with me. He does a great job. And, when I first get in the van in the morning, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't like to talk. I need a half hour, 45 minutes of don't talk to me. I need to just drink my coffee and I have mental problems. I know I do. And I'm kind of an asshole. So that's just my routine. I need some quiet time, so if someone jumps in the vehicle and they start talking my ear off, they'll probably get the irritated look. That I probably give them a nasty look or something. It's like, dude, just don't talk to me for 45 minutes. Let me wake up. But once I get going, I don't mind if they ask me questions when we're driving and stuff like that. I just need that time to wake up in the morning, and then I'm good, man. I appreciate when people ask me questions, or when people, say, hey, why did you do it this way? Or, what I really like? I actually like to be challenged in a polite way, not in a rude way. But if a new guy comes to me, or even someone in a video, I really appreciate when they say, hey, I was taught to do it this way and you do it differently. Why? I love to answer those questions and to explain, well, I do it for this reason, for a certain, for whatever it may be. So, okay. What the hell? Superior. Has anybody ever ran into a cow with their van? It can do, holy crap. Dude, out of the blue, all I see is, has anybody ever ran into a cow with their van? No, I have not ran into a cow. That is a funny comment, Superior. I mean, I understand it's a legit thing, right? But holy crap, dude, that was great in the comments right there. That is too funny. I have never ran into a cow. I've hit a coyote one time in my van because we have coyotes where we live. It was pissed me off too because it was a brand new van, but yeah. Okay, why don't I work on residential systems? I stay busy enough working on the commercial stuff. That's plain and simple. I had said it on a podcast that I recently did that I honestly am intrigued by residential work. I would like to do a little bit more of it, but I'm going to preface that with saying one of the cool things about dealing with commercial customers is I don't have to deal with homeowners, okay? I don't have to deal with people that are having to spend their money that either they had to make a choice on whether or not to fix the air conditioning system or feed their kids. Okay, I don't like to have to deal with that kind of stuff. So I'm intrigued to work on the residential stuff just because I don't do it very often. I'll help a friend out or something like that. But as far as having to deal with homeowners on a daily and collect money and stuff, I'm not interested in that. So, okay, let's see. Do you have hooking up probes on small systems? Eric B, I'm kind of confused on that one, bud. Do I have hooking up probes on small systems if no room? Are you asking me if I have any tips on hooking up small probes if there's no room? I'm assuming that's what you're asking me. And I like the field piece probes because they have that little angled fitting that also I see that Testo just came out with too. So that way you can get them into weird places. And then unfortunately, I don't have a picture of it, but I have a charging adapter on my field piece probes. And you can move that charging adapter around to kind of put that field piece probe in a right angle or different things, if that makes sense. Okay. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to get to some of the things I have on here. So I had a really interesting question, and this may sound kind of silly to some of you guys, but to someone that doesn't quite understand what could happen here, I want them to understand the repercussions of this question. So I have a video a long time ago where I showed a swamp cooler. I've done a lot of work on this refrigeration rack. It's a beat up old refrigeration rack with a swamp cooler attached to it. And I'm assuming that the guy watched. I really didn't pay attention to what video it was attached to, but I just saw the comment and I saw the swamp cooler and I kind of read it and remembered it. He asked me, why don't I add chlorine to the sump of the swamp cooler to reduce the slime and scale? Okay. So first off, I want to explain, I don't know if you're watching right now, I did mention in here, but first off, chlorine is a highly, highly corrosive liquid, okay? It will eat everything it touches. So number one, you do not want to add chlorine to a swamp cooler. And we're not talking a swamp cooler that's blowing down into the building. All this is doing is pre-cooling a refrigeration rack, okay? But if I added chlorine to that swamp cooler, number one, the water evaporates in a swamp cooler so fast that it would be a problem, okay? Number two, the chlorine is going to attack everything metal inside that swamp cooler and slowly disintegrate it. Actually, pretty rapidly disintegrate it. It's also going to get airborne and blow into the rack and attack everything that has copper in it too. I'm going to tell you a story. I once had a customer. It was at a, I can tell you because they don't exist anymore. It was at a GameWorks. GameWorks used to be an arcade, you know, that was like a national arcade they had everywhere, and they were in shopping malls, and they don't exist here anymore. But I did work there one time, and they added like a little bar out in the middle of the game room. And they just kind of built a platform, and they had a refrigerator out there with like a CO2 tank, and they had a keg in it. And so they were serving beer out of this refrigerator. But what kept happening was they kept having drains plugging up on it, and they kept having to pay us to come out to blow the drains out. And they did a preventative maintenance, but we informed them like, hey, you guys want to be cautious about this. And I always recommend to take a cap full of bleach once a week and pour it down the drain, then flush it with water to kind of clear the slime out, because, you know, the chlorine and bleach will eat the slime away and help to sanitize and prevent it. Well, that guy did that, and he noticed that the slime was reduced a lot, but then he took it upon himself because he thought that if he took a cup of bleach, he set it in the refrigerator and left it in there, and he kept replacing that cup over and over and over again. Now, they had a brand new refrigerator, and that refrigerator needed a new evaporator coil after about 3 weeks of operation. And he was like blown away. Why do I need a new evaporator coil? And I told him it's not going to be under warranty. And he's like, why not? And I go, because the coil's corroded away because you kept putting that cup of bleach, you know, and he understood. Like I told him to pour bleach down the drain of the beer dispensing system, not put a cup inside the reach-in. So that's just an example of how corrosive chlorine can be, okay? The next thing, you never ever want to use chlorine. Obviously, I'm just going to say this just to be safe, but chlorine can create all kinds of toxic gases, so you always want to be careful about mixing it with things too. I made the mistake of mixing bleach and ice machine cleaner one time, and it was not a very happy day for me, because what happened was I was cleaning an ice machine, and we used to use bleach on a regular basis to clean ice machines. We would clean them with ice machine cleaner first, and then instead of using liquid sanitizer, we'd put like a cap full of bleach in there. So I cleaned the ice machine, drained everything out, went down the drain. Then I sanitized the ice machine with bleach, and I poured that down the drain too. Well, there was still enough of the concentrated ice machine cleaner. At least this is the way I could figure it happened. There was still enough of the concentrated ice machine cleaner sitting in the P traps. And when the bleach went down there, it mixed with that. And I kid you not, luckily the restaurant wasn't open yet, but I was freaking out because as I was getting down from the ice machine, the smell overtook my lungs, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And then it started coming out the other floor drains too, and it was freaking me out. Luckily, there was nobody in the building, so we didn't have to evacuate. We just opened the doors. But you want to be very, very careful about using corrosive chemicals like that. So, okay, I want to get to these comments real quick, and then I'll get to my other questions. Okay, so I wonder if ice machine cleaner would work for that. I don't know what you're saying for that one. So I've been working on a commercial heat pump that it takes 15 pounds. I work in New York, and when it's winter, the system is overcharged, but the summer comes and it's undercharged. Any ideas? Yeah, you've got an issue there, bud. Are you saying that it takes 15 pounds that the manufacturer says the unit takes? I think you've got a reversing valve issue or something like that, because you shouldn't have to remove gas. I know that was an old wives' tale that you had to do a long, long time ago, way back in the day, where people would think they had to add gas in the winter and remove it in the summer, or vice versa. That is not the case. Usually there's an underlying problem. I don't know what brand the unit is, but for instance, like a lot of times people think that it takes 15 pounds because they're charging via superheat and subcooling, but maybe they're not paying attention to the airflow or other things. There's a lot of factors that can go into play there. So you could have plugged up metering devices. If it's like a carrier package unit with the Accutrol metering devices, those things can get restricted, and people think they have to add more gas to get it to work right. There's a lot of variables there. So I'd be glad to talk to you more about that. It's Jonathan Lopez. If you wanted to send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. But that's definitely not right. So in the place of bleach with... Oh, okay. I see what you're saying, Zach. Yeah, I mean, you could use ice machine cleaner, but no. Realistically, on the swamp coolers, the biggest thing is you have to understand... Ralph, thank you very much, man. You have to understand on the swamp coolers that they're evaporative coolers, okay? So the calcium is not going to evaporate. So the water will evaporate, but the calcium stays. And a lot of times, you know, if you have a nicer evaporative cooler, what they're going to do, what you could do to reduce the calcium buildup in there is you could have like a bleeder on the water pump. So that way when the water's being pumped out, it bleeds off so much of that water and wastes it down the drain, because then theoretically you're going to be changing the water in the swamp cooler more often, okay? Captive Air has a pretty cool design where they're using, they don't have a standing sump in their evaporative coolers, and basically they just have an on-demand water spraying, like a misting system that just sprays the pads so many times. But I mean, anytime you're using an evaporative cooler, you're going to have water and calcium buildup. That's just part of the beast, okay? Evaporative cooling is, it's good in some ways, but it's also very bad and very difficult to maintain in a lot of other ways. So, okay. Update on the merch, Tito 209. Yeah, that's a whole thing, guys. I have ordered more shirts. The people that I'm using are taking forever. I tried using Teespring and it's just taking forever to get the stuff. So I'm just waiting for them to send me something. I promise you guys I'll get to it. I know. I really want them to, but I'm just so particular about the way that they're turning out. So, okay, I'm going to get to a couple more of my things. You guys make sure you put your questions in caps lock, so that way we know that they're actually questions and not just things going on in the chat. Okay, so, this is a great one. So the question was, how do we calculate the capacity of equipment to confirm it is sized correctly? Because I had mentioned in my previous video that I uploaded actually today that the equipment was oversized. And so the person had asked me, like, how do we know in the field if our equipment is oversized? This is something that I deal with on a regular, okay? Because I always say that I have trust issues, and I really do. I like to verify information myself. What I find is majority of the equipment out there is oversized. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to, when I replace it, I'm going to put smaller equipment in there, but there's a lot of reasons why we might oversize our equipment. The biggest reason typically is if we have very, very high ambient temperatures. And what happens with the refrigeration system is, I always say that refrigeration works in a very small envelope, typically without any kind of, mechanical subcooling or different things. Our window of proper operation for a normal walk-in cooler system is about 70 to 90 degrees. Let's just say 70 to 100 degrees, okay? But once you get past 100, your capacity, the amount of BTUs that compressor can, the capacity of the system is reduced dramatically once you get past 100 degrees. Really when you're in the 90 degree range, but most of our equipment can handle 100 degrees. Anytime you get below 70 degrees, then you start to run into problems with the expansion valve feeding properly, especially on older expansion valves. And that's why we have head pressure control valves, fan cycling, different things. Okay. So, a lot of times manufacturers or engineers will oversize equipment a little bit, okay, for a couple different reasons, but a lot of them are to lower the discharge temperatures of the compressor and to reduce the liquid saturation temperatures, okay, which are all greatly affected by the outdoor ambience. So we will oftentimes oversize a little bit, which this is kind of becoming a little bit less popular because a lot of people are worried about efficiency and electricity usage and different things. But you can also damage equipment by oversizing it too much. If you have way too oversized equipment, then you're going to burn up your compressor because you're not going to have enough suction gas coming back. You can have all kinds of problems. One of the common things right now is if you're converting equipment to R427A, 448A, which is the new replacement refrigerant for 404, one of the more popular ones. Most manufacturers are going to encourage you to upsize whatever the BTU requirements of what you've calculated you need. They'll typically tell you to go with one size bigger. So if you calculate that you need a 2 horsepower condensing unit to run your evaporator with the normal, load calculation, they're going to tell you to go with like a 2.25 or 2.5 horsepower because they're concerned about the discharge temps of 448A. So, a lot of that goes into play too. Different manufacturers tend to, in my opinion, oversize their equipment. Cold Zone or Russell is one of the number ones. I tend to find oversized condensers. I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, but it also can kind of mess you up if you're going to go in there and try to make sure a system is operating to, if you think it's going to operate perfectly, it's not necessarily the truth. And I'm going to say too, there's not a lot of refrigeration equipment out there that operates 100% by the book. Okay. You got to kind of use you got to think about it, and you're just going to have to use your smarts basically and know when something's not right. Okay. A lot goes into commissioning systems. It's very important to commission a system and write the information down so that way you help the next technician. Something like when you do a startup on a walk-in cooler and you're all done, it'd be really great. And I'm not even going to say that I do this all the time, but it'd be really smart if you commissioned it properly. Wrote down what your outdoor ambient over your condensing temp is. Write down what evaporator TD is actually measured. Write down what your superheat is at what temperature outside, your subcooling, if you're working on a system that doesn't have an expansion valve. But, doing that is going to help you down the road. So that way, if someone else comes in and you have that information. Now, it's very rare that people commission equipment like that. But, something like that could really, really help someone to try to figure things out. So as far as oversizing condensing units and evaporators, how do I verify if the equipment is correct? Well, I carry a computer with me. I can't expect my technicians to carry a computer with them, but I carry a computer with me. So, if one of my techs calls me and says, hey, I think this something's not right, this is going on. The first thing I do when I look at that equipment is do a load calculation really quick. There's a couple different softwares out there. Trenton makes one and Russell makes one, which you can download for free, I believe. Yeah. And it'll do refrigeration load calculations for you. There's also, if you actually happen to have it sitting right here, if you download the Heatcraft refrigeration manual, engineering manual, It tells you how to do a heat loss or heat load calculation on a refrigeration system too. You can do it by hand. I prefer to use the software. You just got to input a couple numbers. You basically input the indoor or the inside diameter of the box, the height, the width, and the depth of the walk-in, what temperature you want to maintain, what the outdoor ambient is, how many people are going to be in the box on a regular basis, how many lights, how many doors, all that information. And then it's going to give you a BTU load requirement. And then you size your evaporator off of that load requirement, and then you size your condenser off of that. So if I was to verify, I would start with the load calculation, then look at what size there should be in that box, give or take, one size bigger, one size smaller, and then look at how big the condensing unit is. And that's going to help me to understand things. I will tell you that it's very rare that I see a walk-in cooler or a walk-in freezer that actually has a 10-degree evaporator TD, which most equipment is supposed to be designed with a 10-degree TD, but it's very rare that you actually see that. All right, let's see if I'm missing any questions in the chat here, guys. Okay. How do you do an efficiency test on a scroll compressor if you can't pump them down and watch your gauge like we do on reciprocating compressors? Well, Ralph, if you're lucky and you're working on a Copeland compressor, then what I want you to do is download the Copeland mobile app, and they have a performance calculator on the Copeland mobile app. You input the amperage, the voltage, the low side and the high side pressure, and it's going to give you a pass or fail scenario basically to tell you if that compressor is operating within Copeland's recommended guidelines. Okay, that is the Copeland mobile app. That's another video topic that I'll do. I know I've done them before where I talk about the different apps that I use. So that would be how I would do a performance calculation on a scroll compressor. Tecumseh doesn't really have a performance calculation. I know they've been trying to push their scroll compressors again after a hiatus for like 15 years, but yeah, they don't have a performance calculator that I know of yet for the Tecumseh ones. So have I replaced a reciprocating compressor with a scroll? I have, just Russ, and it's been a problem. It was an older carrier package unit, and what I find is that when I would put the scroll compressor in there, you have to be careful. And I'm going to give you an example. You can't just trust what a supply house says, okay? Supply houses, if you call a supply house and you say, hey, I've got a compressor, can you give me a replacement compressor that's a scroll? They'll say yes. Well, what you got to be careful about is how your air conditioner was already designed. So oftentimes supply houses will give you, oh yeah, this one's just a little bit bigger, but it'll be okay. And then what happens is you'll go off on head pressure or something like that, or not have proper oil return or different things. So you have to pay attention, be very cautious about replacing reciprocating compressors with scroll compressors, unless I would say you should try to get a hold of someone at the manufacturer, or have an engineer from that particular supply house, not just a counter guy, tell you, yeah, this will work. A lot of times, like companies like, bigger supply houses, they have actual engineers that'll do load calculations, and they can ask they'll have like a technical support department. Some of the smaller or some of the air conditioning supply houses, I'm not a fan of their tech support, but some of the refrigeration supply houses, they have some pretty good tech support guys that'll be able to help you out with that kind of stuff. So, all right. Can you adjust harvest time on Manitowoc ice machine? Hashim. That's a loaded question, bud. There's a lot of factors that go into the harvest time on a Manitowoc ice machine. So your compressor could have efficiency problems, ice thickness. There's so many different things. I can't even begin to answer that one right now. So Hashim, I'd encourage you to send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com, and I can maybe get some more context. But when you do send me an email, give me more context. What's the model number of the machine where you're working on? What's going on with it? Why do you want to decrease the harvest time? What is it that you are trying to achieve here? Give me some context, and then I can try to help you out a little bit more. All right, let's see. Adam, I did see Brian's Copeland teardown class video. I started to watch that before the stream. I didn't get to finish it yet. If you guys have never had the opportunity to go to a Copeland teardown class, do it. Oftentimes they're a couple $100. But the amount of knowledge that you will get from a Copeland teardown class is totally worth it. And usually you get paperwork and booklets and different things too. So, but yeah, if you guys haven't, Brian did upload a video of a Copeland teardown class where they had a Copeland engineer out there talking about different things to look at. And I think they were leaning more towards supermarket stuff, but I mean, that still applies to normal compressors too. So, Let's see. How can you be successful? Joshua Keating. How can you be successful as an apprentice in HVAC? The first thing I'm going to tell you, the first day of your apprenticeship is, don't take this the wrong way, but shut your mouth and listen. Okay? That's going to be one of the first things I can tell you. Now, I'm not saying that I don't let my apprentices talk, but oftentimes you'll have people that say, I learned this in school, or you're wrong, or this or that, or no. Okay? First off, don't be rude, be polite. If you feel that someone's not doing something right, then ask them the right way. Don't be a dick about it, okay? But what are things that I think you could do to succeed as an apprentice? Number one, pay attention. Number two, do not stare at your phone all day, kind of like I was mentioning in the beginning of this video or this stream. Do not stare at your phone while you're driving the whole time. Ask questions as long as you're not bugging the mechanic you're riding with, okay? Pay attention to what you're working on. Take pictures on your own phone of models and serial numbers and research when you get home. You know, think about the job. Don't just go home and turn off work. Go home and think about what happened that day. Try to analyze why the tech that you were working with did something. I'm going to tell you right now, as an apprentice, you're probably going to come into this field after you finish school and you're going to think, oh my gosh, my school taught me one way and this tech is a hack because he's doing it this way. That's not necessarily true, okay? There's a lot of things you're going to learn in school that I'm not going to say you're going to throw out the door, but there's the right way to do things, and then there's sometimes the way you got to do things to get things to make it work, okay? And then also, too, you can't always be 100% proper and do everything the right way. Sometimes you got to wing it. Sometimes you've got to do certain things to make a refrigerator work properly. And this is actually going to segue into another question that I had, and I'm going to answer this too. I had a question about, and you're more than welcome to send me an email on that, Joshua, and I can answer some more too, okay? So I had released a video last week, I think, on fixing a reach-in freezer drawers. I think that was last week sometime, and I had to change an expansion valve. I've gotten this a few times, actually, where I get quite a few people saying, how come I didn't protect that valve? Or how come, while I was brazing it? Or how come my torch was so hot while I was brazing it? I probably damaged that valve. That's what people say, okay? First off, you have to understand something. You guys don't understand what I was going through when that happened. Number one, there's no excuse for cutting corners, okay? But when you're working on those OmniTemp coils, I think a couple people said that I should have pulled that coil out before I changed that valve. I'm not pulling a coil out of a box, okay? Number one, I was already climbing into that thing all super tight, right? And to undo all the electrical and everything, that's a nightmare. You're asking for trouble trying to pull a coil out of a box like that. Sometimes you can get them out, but that was not one where I could have gotten the coil out. Number two, why was my torch so hot when I was brazing in that valve? Well, because if you listen to what I said in the video, I had to weld what I call blind, okay? Welding blind, in my opinion, or my definition of that is only be able to access one part of that joint that you're brazing on or welding on, and not being able to get your torch all the way around to flow the heat to make sure that your solder flows around. So oftentimes what you have to do is you can only get your torch in one particular corner of that valve, and you got to heat the heck out of it to get it hot so that way the solder whips around and pulls into that valve 100%, okay? Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. I think I got a bunch of complaints and feedback on a package unit that I was changing an expansion valve on too, on a Lennox unit. And they were like, how come you didn't put a towel on that valve or wrap that valve or all this different stuff? How come I didn't spray heat gel on there or whatever? I don't like heat gel, okay? Because I've had heat gel bite me in the ass before where I sprayed it on there and then it dripped into my joint and then I couldn't get the joint to braze anymore, okay? I don't mind using some of the heat compounds like the Hvacr wet rag, but that particular package unit, I'm probably telling you guys something you probably can't even picture, but the particular package unit was a Lennox package unit, and those valves are so tiny that I couldn't get the heat compound on there, okay? Sometimes the heat compounds aren't a great answer either because a lot of times the heat compound will fall apart if it's like upside down or something, and it'll fall on you while you're brazing on it. So oftentimes, again, maybe it's not the most proper way to do it, I will braze a valve without covering it up, and you got to do what you got to do, okay? So that's going to do that. Let me get to these questions here. Sometimes it's fine to be a hack to get the walk-in. Yeah, that's true. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. So, okay. Let's see if I'm missing anything else. What else? I'm not seeing any other caps lock things, guys. So I'm going to get to some more of this other stuff. It's hard for me to pay attention without having dead air to the chat. So that's why if you guys got questions or things you want me to address, it really helps if you put it in caps lock. So Use a jeweler's torch. Yeah, but wet rag does work. I mean, it's nice, but sometimes it doesn't fit where you need it to fit. So, and as far as the jeweler's torch, I don't carry a bunch of those things. I just have my standard tip. I mean, I have some of those weird tips that have different, flames where you can do multiple flames and stuff, but that's just going to catch something on fire when you're working in a tiny little reach-in. So, okay. All right. Make your customers happy. Yep. Okay. Same question I get all the time. Why do we still use mechanical defrost clocks and temp controls versus digital? A lot of these questions come from other countries, Australia, Paris, other places. The United States is way behind on our technology. We're starting to get into using digital controls as defrost timers, such as like Dixel controllers or the ERC, Danfoss controls, key to therm temp controls. A lot of them are starting to come with defrost built in. I don't make it a habit of going and modifying equipment on a regular. A lot of times I like to put back what's in there because that was the way that it was designed. You got to remember that sometimes when someone calls me out to work on a walk-in cooler, it's not Dallas. Thank you very much, man. I really appreciate it. A lot of times people will call me out to work on their walk-in cooler and it's a Saturday night. The last thing I want to be there on a Saturday night is trying to convert a mechanical defrost clock to a digital one and having to run wires and do all kinds of stuff like that. Okay. So in a perfect world, if I have a situation that I know I plan to work on something and I can convert it, then I might consider converting to like a digital Dixel control or something like that. But a lot of times, I don't plan to go out to these places. They just call me and say, hey, my reach-in's down or my walk-in's down, and I got to go work on it on the fly. So I'm not necessarily going to be doing all kinds of crazy conversions and different things while I'm there doing that job. So what are my thoughts on small commercial HVACR company not offering health insurance? Jacob, that is a very, very... that's a really hard one. Okay. You got to understand something as a business owner that we have to deal with on a regular is business is expensive. Okay. I'm not saying every business owner is 100% fair and honest and whatnot. Okay. But I got to give people the benefit of the doubt. We struggle as a company. If I told you guys what our health insurance costs are on a monthly basis, hit me up on another thing and I'll have to sit down and do the work because honestly, I'll have to do some research on that. I have a hard time with numbers. Things go in one ear and out the other. I'll think about things before we decide to do something. But when it comes to like a health insurance cost, when you hear what we as a company that has essentially 6 people on the payroll that we're paying health insurance for, it's stupid expensive how much we're paying a month. Okay. Health insurance costs are through the roof right now. So I don't know the situation of that particular small HVACR company, okay? But I do know that health insurance is so ridiculously expensive that a lot of the times it's worth it for a business to take a penalty or whatnot to, it's sometimes cheaper for a business to take a penalty and to not provide health insurance. So I can't answer that specific question. I'd be glad if you want to send me an email, we can talk about it more, but there's a lot of expenses that go into doing a business and running a business, I should say. So what is the difference between an AC compressor versus a freezer compressor? Camaro HVAC. It's all about the capacity of the compressor and the displacement of the compressor. Okay. Those are some crazy technical terms, but as a lower temp compressor, we have to have different cooling means coming back to that compressor. And then a lot of times to get the temperatures lower, the compressor will have to be essentially a bigger compressor. Okay. But as far as what's the difference between the two compressors, I mean, it's the capacity really is what it is. But, compressors still pump. I mean, they still pump the same, but it's just about the tonnage, the horsepower, the capacity that changes. Okay. Okay. Compound will fall off and fall apart. That is true. It will, especially if it doesn't have enough moisture in it. So wet rag can be too bulky sometimes. I use it as much as I can, but sometimes I don't. So yeah, compression ratio, Chris Cooley says that's exactly what it is. Displacement. Yep. So, okay, guys, let's see what else I'm missing here. What are my thoughts? How can I determine if a watt motor RPM is correct? That's an interesting one. How can you determine if a watt motor RPM is correct? Because, it's kind of something that you have to, for me, I tend to kind of, get used to what the fan CFMs that it's blowing out. It's something that I get used to hearing. Okay, so if I'm working on like a little true reach-in, that's a very common reach-in that the watt motors will start to go bad on. And what they will do, like evaporative fan motor on a true reach-in, will start. And I have a video on this where we had a temperature controller that was diagnosed, but in all actuality, what was wrong was the evaporative fan motor was spinning too slow, and it was causing the box to satisfy too early. So on the true reach-ins, this is kind of one of those things. There's not really, I don't think there's a way that you can really measure it, because I mean, you can't really get like a flow hood on the evaporator fan blade or anything like that, but it's just kind of something you got to get used to and listening to. I work on the reach-ins, and I remember, you know, when I walk into a reach-in, I know the sound and I recognize what it's to sound like, and I kind of feel and I know what I should feel as far as the air blowing out. I imagine that you could use like a vane anemometer and put it on there and kind of get used to, but vane anemometers can be difficult. That's the one with the little wheel, and you put it in front and it blows and gives you an RPM or CFM reading. But you know, it's just kind of something that comes with time, getting used to them and knowing the sounds that you should hear and how much air is normal. You just got to kind of be able to feel that. Okay, let's see what else. Just Russ, thank you very much, man. What is the reason that the refrigeration units are measured by tonnage instead of horsepower? That is a really good question. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that one. But yeah, I mean, sometimes they measure them by horsepower too. So that's the confusing thing. I'd like to know the answer to that myself. So I'll try to do some research on that and find out why they measure them that way. Okay. Everybody sells that new Calgon thermo paste. Yeah, Superior. I buy the wet rag. It's very difficult to find wet rag in my area too. If you can find, where are you at, Superior? I can't remember what area you're in. But here we have Allied Refrigeration stocks Viper products, and they can get a lot of the Viper products. Some of the other supply houses will stock Viper products, or I should say refrigeration technology products. But some supply houses don't. So if you can't find it at your local supplier, you can always look up True Tech Tools. Zach was in here earlier, but he has a offer code, and the offer code that Zach has will. What the hell? Yeah. Thanks for deleting that, Justin. I don't know what the hell that was. I was intrigued by a deleted comment. I really appreciate it, Fluke196. Thank you very much, bud. Okay, I kind of got distracted there by that comment that was deleted, and I had to answer that one. So, okay, let's see. I got a little distracted here, and I think, yeah, I'm kind of out of those questions right now. So, I don't know that we have Sid Harvey out here, BBC4. I don't think we do. Okay, I'm going to get to another question I have on my sheet right here. So I already talked about calculating capacity of the equipment. Okay, so I'm going to do a load calculation to calculate the capacity of the equipment. The other thing I'm going to do is I keep these manuals in my van. I have Heatcraft condensing unit manuals. You can find all this stuff on Heatcraft's website, heatcraftrpd.com. Okay, you can go to the literature section. You can download anything you want. So the condensing unit manual will teach you how to do line sizes, how to adjust refrigerant charge on a microchannel condenser. It will, help you with that. The other thing is the little manuals that come with your, let me find one right here. I can't seem to find one right now. Okay, so let's see if this is right here. Yeah, so the manuals that come with your refrigeration walk-in evaporators, I save those too, because those help me when I'm doing a load calculation or while I'm trying to verify the size of the equipment. This is one of them that comes with a walk-in cooler. And if you open this up, if I was a good tech here, I would pull up a screenshot of this. But if you open it up, it tells you how to size the evaporator's expansion valves. And you basically find the temperature, the refrigerant, the BTUs, and it tells you how to size the valves based off of the fact that you're using 150 PSI head pressure or 100 PSI or 180 head pressure control valve. So these manuals really help me when I'm trying to verify whether equipment is sized properly. Because once I do my load calculation, I'm going to find the evaporator. I'm going to verify if the expansion valve is sized correctly. Then I'm going to find the condensing unit size and make sure that it performs at the right BTUs at the right temperature. Another thing you really want to pay attention to on refrigeration equipment is, let's say you go to the condensing units information, you find out that it might put out 30,000 BTUs, but it might only put out 30,000 BTUs at whatever temperature. But as you get to 110 degrees outside, that BTUs that it puts out drops off dramatically. So oftentimes that's when you'll see why people will oversize equipment, is because they they are trying to compensate for the really high temperature swings that you might have in the summertime. Oftentimes, if you guys do any chain restaurant work, what you'll find is a lot of chain restaurants will size their equipment like generic across the whole chain. So, one particular restaurant might have 800 stores across the United States. And in Southern California, where last summer we got to 120 degrees, all of a sudden everything was hurting and it was having a hard time coming down to temperature and maintaining temps. Well, it's because that equipment was not sized for 120 degrees. It was sized for 100 degrees, or whatever it was, wherever they did their load calculation at. So that's just another thing we tend to notice. Let's see. Let's see what else I'm missing in here. Okay. Let me see what else I have on my sheet here. How do we calculate capacity? I already did that. Cool. I got my questions answered there. So, if you guys have more questions, let's throw them into the chat and I'll try to get to them. Yeah, I'll try to get to those. I'm kind of done with my things I wanted to talk about. So I'd love to talk about some more of what you guys have. What app do I use for load calculations? So I personally use an app from Russell Refrigeration called Russbox, Russbox. That's what I use for it. JC asked if I am located in Southern California, and yes, I am. I'm in the Inland Empire, specifically Riverside, California. So let's see what else. Let's see what else here. And the tonnage, Ricardo, the tonnage can be, remember that the tonnage of the equipment might change via, well, the BTU output will change via the temperature of the evaporator too. So that can affect the way. So just because you want to put a 1 ton on something, that 1 ton may not be quite enough because it might be a low temp system and you might have to go bigger. Do I carry a capture hood to measure evaporator CFMs? No, I don't. And that's why I was kind of joking saying I couldn't capture the evaporator CFMs. I don't carry a capture hood in my trucks. What tablet do I use for my smart probes? I use it's right here in front of me. It's an older Samsung Tab S10.1, I think, or something like that. When I buy things, like for instance, that tablet, when I bought that, I probably bought that tablet 3 years ago. I base the tablets or the phones that I buy based off of the cases. So I wanted an Otter case. So first I went to the Otter website, found out what cases or what tablets they made cases for. And then I found the tablet that I wanted because I wanted to have a big old fancy Otter case on there. What's the correct way to mount a sensing bulb inside the evaporator box or outside on suction line? Yeah, that's an interesting one, Israel. And I'm going to address that too, because that's another question I got a lot of feedback on. So when you're working on reach-in coolers, oftentimes, even Sporlin will say that they prefer you not to mount the sensing bulb on the bottom of the suction line, which I actually did that in one of my videos, on a small reach-in cooler. Anything below, I think, 1/2 inch or 5/8, they tell you can mount it anywhere on the line as long as it's not on the very bottom. That's typically what they tell you. Now, when you get above 5/8, that's when they start telling you 10 and 2 or whatever. You want to lean on Sporlin to find out their methods, but as far as mounting on a reach-in cooler, I typically mount the sensing bulb inside the evaporator. A lot of times they come mounted inside the evaporators. And then if you can, it's not always practical, but it's best to get a piece of insulation tape on there to try to eliminate the air that's moving across that from affecting the bulb. But it's not very practical too. When you're working with some of the reach-in coolers, you kind of got to do what you got to do because it's so small inside those things. Pumps preferred R22 drop-in and why? Fred Dog, R22, bud. I had that one come in on a question earlier. Someone said, what drop-in do I like to use? I said, I don't. I use R22. So as of right now, I still use R22. Basically, my customers, I bring it up to them every season. I haven't addressed my customers yet this season, but I bring it up to them and say, hey, here's the deal. The prices of R22s going up. Do you want us to try to use a drop-in? And then I give them the problems about the drop-ins that we might run into. And typically they say no, they want to stick with R22 because they know the costs are high, but the risks aren't worth it a lot of times. So my customers in the past have usually chosen to go with just R22. So and that's actually, for some reason, oh no, I do have it on here. Okay, cool. So if I had to choose a particular drop-in that I would want to use, okay, I would use 407C. But I would do an oil change on the system, okay? I'm not going to use 407C with mineral oil. Now, me personally, guys, I'm not going to go put in a little bit of POE oil mixed with the mineral oil, because I know some people say you can do that, but that's not how I'm going to roll. Okay. If I'm going to use 407C, I'm going to do a complete oil change on that compressor. I'm going to take it out, tip it over, pour it out. You got to be careful about tipping over compressors. It's a pain in the butt. That's why most of the people out there don't do them. Okay. You know, I know it's inevitable that I'm going to have to start using some sort of replacement for R22, but right now I'm still using R22, and I'm just not a fan of all these different replacements. My personal opinion, all these different HFC refrigerants, they need polyester oil, okay? There's a lot of misinformation about there about MO99 being compatible with mineral oil. That's baloney, okay? It's not compatible with mineral oil. Now, if you read the technical documentation on MO99, it specifically will tell you that it works best with polyester oil, but it might work okay as long as you don't have oil return problems or high pressure drop problems or this or that, then it'll work with mineral oil. Well, basically that means that it won't work with mineral oil, okay? You run into problems with the mineral oil mixing with that refrigerant and bringing it back to the compressor. So if you ever have an issue where the oil leaves the compressor, it's going to have a hard time getting back if you have mineral oil in the system. And that, in my opinion, that goes for pretty much any drop-in out there, okay? A lot of those guys tell you that, oh yeah, it'll work. And in my experience, it's just led to problems. So that's just my opinion, guys. I'm not the end-all be-all. I know that some supply houses tell you that it's okay. I'm going to tell you something. I was at a local supply house recently. You guys may know they don't carry R22 at all. This is one of the carrier supply houses. I'm not going to tell you which one, but it's one of the guys that sells some of the carrier stuff. And they don't carry R22. They only carry the alternative refrigerants. And I was looking at their little poster board where it had their prices of refrigerants, and it blew me away because, and let me see if I can pull up this picture. It specifically said that, let's see if I can pull this up because I want to quote this correctly when I say what it said on their poster here. Let's see if I can find it here. I don't think I'm going to be able to find it fast enough. No, I'm not. But it said, oh no, it's right here. So it says, for Blue On 30, okay, it said no oil change, but it says non-drop-in, okay? But then next to 407C, it says non-drop-in. But then next to R422B, it says drop-in, okay? Now, what I'm getting at is they're saying that some refrigerants are drop-ins and some aren't. So what that supply house is telling, they're giving misinformation out there. They're telling people, and this is where it gets kind of technical and iffy when you talk about a drop-in refrigerant, because a lot of people think that drop-in means that you can mix the gases on top of another gas, and that is not true. You can never mix gases, guys, period, okay? Have people done it? Yes. Has it worked? Yes, but don't do it because you're changing that refrigerant. So this particular supply house basically was advertising that 422B was a drop-in and you could put it on top of R22, and that's bull, okay? What I'm trying to point out by telling you that is supply houses give you misinformation. You need to do some of the research yourself, and you can't just be a lemming and do what the supply houses tell you to do, because that is wrong. For a supply house to say that you can drop 422B on top of R22 is insane, and that is just stupid of that supply houses. To be honest with you, I did want to get into a fight with the manager of that supply house, but I was pissed when I saw that sign. And I'll actually post it on my Instagram too, because that was pretty ridiculous that they were implying that you could mix refrigerants, because that's just stupid. So, okay. Sorry, that pissed me off there. Let's see what else I missed in here. I don't see any other questions coming up in here, guys. Let's see. What about this? What unit has burnout? Does the oil and also burns? Do you lose oil somewhere? Ralph, I don't understand that one. Oh, wait. When a unit has a burnout compressor, does the oil also burn? Do you lose the oil somewhere? No, a burnout is just implying that there was an electrical short inside the compressor and it burnt the oil, meaning that the oil now smells really funky. You would really see this especially when we had mineral oil with R22 and even R12, some of the refrigerants with chlorines, you would get different acid burns and different things in them, okay? So the oil doesn't disappear. It ends up somewhere in the system. A lot of times, if you have a really, really bad burn, you'll get oil stuck in the evaporator or the condenser, and you may change the compressor, but that oil will come back and contaminate that compressor. So that's why they say to do oil changes or to go check the oil multiple times after you do that. A lot of times, if you guys have seen in some of my videos, what I'll do is if I have an electrical burn inside the compressor or a burnout, I will pour the oil out of the compressor and measure it. And if I've got, less than 10% loss, then I really won't worry about it too much. But if I have a large amount of oil that's lost, I try to do that anytime I do a compressor change out, especially if it's a mechanical failure, to try to see if maybe we've got oil trapped somewhere else, because it's also bad for a system to have too much oil. So let's say you do 2 compressor changes over the course of 5 years, but each one of those was having an oil return problem. Well, now you have, 3 times the oil inside that system, and it's going to ruin that third compressor too. So, let's see what else I got in here. Do I use hard starts to save energy on startup or just a last resort? Israel. Typically only use hard starts as a last resort when you have to, for the most part. I know that, sometimes you got to put a hard start on a compressor because and it may last for a while after you put that hard start on, but I'm going to give the customer all the information that I have and explain to them that this compressor is on its way out. We can try this. There's no guarantees, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to basically make the compressor or customer completely aware that there's a problem and make sure that they understand that. Oh, that's funny. I just got an email from Heatcraft right now too. That was kind of funny. Okay. Why do I think there's not that many girls in our trade? Because we don't make it a very inviting trade, and it looks to be really technical and really difficult. And I would imagine this is what people think. I mean, it's for the same reason I think that we don't have a lot of the younger generation in our trade too, is the parents, they want quote unquote better for their kids. If my daughter wanted to do HVAC, I would let her, okay? But if she wants to do something different, I'm going to let her. I'm not going to tell her what she needs to do. So I think we just don't make it a very inviting trade to be in for women to come into this trade. I definitely think that there's a place for women in this trade. I think that, and there is some girls out there. There's a girl on Instagram. Her name is, her Instagram name is Chiller Chick, and I think her name is Brandy, and she's really advocating for women in the trades. I believe she's up in Canada, and yeah, she does some has some great posts about how you can be a woman and work in this trade too. So, what's my work rig? It's a van. It's a Chevy Express van. I've got a video on it on my channel, BBC4, if you want to look it up. I don't have a link to that right now, but it just shows a van tour and stuff. Yeah, that's good. I think we need anything we can get in here. So, any more people, whether it be women or men, I think we need them in this trade. So, JC, your boy wants to get into the trade. Good for him. I think that's great. If he's mechanically inclined, I think he'll do really well. So, all right, gentlemen. Let's see if you guys got more questions or anything else you want me to talk about. Throw it in here. Let's try to get to these. I want to get to your guys' questions and stuff and see. If you guys don't, then we're probably going to get ready to end this unless you guys got something else you want me to talk about. Let's see what else. I'm just making sure I didn't miss. If I missed anything, guys, throw it in there again. I don't know if I missed anything yet. So how do you adjust the TD, Immigration Freedom asked? So your evaporator TD, we're talking about the evaporator. Fred Dog, thank you very much. We're talking about the evaporator TD is controlled by your expansion valve, okay? And it's controlled by the size of your evaporator coil too. But basically, we may change the TD. The TD is going to be how cold our evaporator coil gets, the surface of the evaporator coil or the refrigerant in the coil. Okay, so how to measure your TD is you take your vapor saturation temperature. So you find that the low side pressure as close to the evaporator coil as possible, and you convert that pressure via your temperature pressure chart, and you find the vapor saturation temperature. And then you take the return air temperature, the air coming into the coil, and you subtract the two, okay? Or you find the difference between the two. And that number, the difference between the two, is going to be your evaporator TD, okay? So that's essentially going to be the performance of your evaporator. Most of the time on walk-in coolers and walk-in freezers, unless we need like for the most part, you're going to find a design of 10-degree evaporator TD. So you would adjust the evaporator TD by adjusting your expansion valve, okay? But you only have so much adjustment there because you also size your expansion valve based off of the size of the evaporator and the TD that you're looking for. So just because, it was engineered at one TD, you can't necessarily change the TD too much just by adjusting your valve. But you do get adjustment out of the TD by adjusting the expansion valve. Hopefully I didn't confuse you guys there too much. So, What would I use if nitro does not push out the trapped oil in the evaporator or condenser? Ralph, I don't have a great solution for that. I've tried using like the flushes and different things, and in all honesty, I don't see much of a difference. If you have trapped oil, you know, sometimes you got to do some weird things. I've taken air conditioning systems. I think I might have shown it in some videos where I completely disconnect the evaporator from the system, braze in a line on the top of the evaporator, and pressurize it with nitrogen and blow the oil out the bottom of the evaporator. Sometimes I'll do the same thing on the condenser, cutting it, brazing in fittings and blowing in and out, finding traps in the system and blowing them out. But it's going to be hard to get all the oil out of the system. It really, really is. You can do some other things too. Like for instance, if you have a system that's logged with oil, you can try heating up, you know, different components, putting heaters in places and running, you know, different things to try to heat up the oil and get it to move around the system. What are the symptoms of a plugged header on a rooftop unit? What do you mean by header? So for instance, Alan, on the carrier package units, they have the fixed orifice metering devices that are in the evaporator headers, and those things will plug up all the time. Is that what you're talking about? You had to do it today, so not too proud. Die hard on what, bud? I don't know what I'm missing there. I don't know if I missed your comment there, die hard. Yeah, I don't see it up here. So what is it that you had to do today that you weren't too proud about? Oh yeah, the ORIT and the CROT valves. Chris Cooley had asked, did I do a calculation and you missed it, Josh J? No, Josh, refresh my information. I don't know if I had told you I was going to cover something in the stream or not. So tell me your question that you wanted me to do and I'll answer it. So the crankcase pressure regulating valves. Okay. So the crankcase pressure regulating valves, we'll typically install them on a system. For the most part, you won't see crankcase pressure regulating valves or CROT valves or CRO valves. You won't see them on newer systems a lot, okay? A lot of times you will typically see a crankcase pressure regulating valve on an older compressor, and it usually means that the compressor's on its way out. Sometimes we put them in preventatively on a new system. What a crankcase pressure regulating valve is for is to reduce the load on the compressor on a hot pull down. Okay, so say for instance, we've got a walk-in cooler and it's really, really hot outside and the walk-in cooler is at 90 degrees. We're just turning it on. The load on that compressor is going to be extremely high because we're trying to pull that 90 degree evaporator down. And that system's not really designed for a 90 degree evaporator. So you're going to get a flood back of refrigerant coming to that compressor, and the compressor is going to go off on high amps, okay? Typically is a worst case scenario. So what we can do is we can have a valve that's in the system. Now, we aren't necessarily going to see a 90 degree evaporator, but what you will see is sometimes on older systems, after a defrost, you'll see a really heavy load on the system. And so we'll have a crankcase pressure regulating valve reducing the pressure of the refrigerant coming back, okay? So oftentimes you'll see a 0 to 60 or 60, like 60 PSI or something. Like it'll regulate the suction pressure basically below 60 PSI or whatever. They're adjustable. You know, you can set them up. So basically how we would set a crankcase pressure regulating valve on a compressor is we would put the system under a heavy load and we would put our amp clamp on the run winding of that compressor and we would turn it on under a heavy load and we would adjust the valve to reduce the refrigerant flow until the run load amps or until the amps of the compressor comes below, or rated load amps, I should say, comes below what the factory says the maximum amp draw for that compressor should be. So you adjust the valve, reduce the pressure under a heavy load, okay, on a crankcase pressure regulating valve. And then what happens is after you leave, it's now an automatic valve that anytime there's a heavy load on that box, it won't allow that compressor to get overloaded with refrigerant and cause high amp draw and or like a thermal lockout or thermal overload situation. So that's the whole point of a crankcase pressure regulating valve, okay, is to reduce the load on the compressor coming back on a hot pull down or under a heavy load condition. It's not very often that you're going to see a box at like 90 degrees. But if you were, I'm sure they would have all kinds of safeties built in. Now, Sporlan also has an expansion valve that's a pressure limiting expansion valve that basically eliminates the need for a pressure regulating or a crankcase pressure regulator, essentially, okay? So the pressure limiting expansion valve won't let the pressure in the system get above a certain pressure. That's another thing that can happen too. And it's just trying to reduce the load of refrigerant coming back to the compressor to try to reduce the amp draw. Hopefully that helps. Usually you're never supposed to use a CPR valve. Yeah, I mean, CPR valves, typically they're not there unless they're there. You know, we'll install them to like save a compressor that's on its way out. So, okay, so Chris Cooley, I think you're mistaking those for a head pressure control valve on like a rack system. Because like instead of a headmaster on a rack system, they would use two different valves, a holdback valve, and I'm trying to remember the name for it. I don't deal with those big valves, but there's two valves that you'll typically use as a headmaster, a head pressure control valve. Is that what you're thinking of? But no, you're not necessarily going to use two valves when you're using a crankcase pressure regulator. Not necessarily. Maybe on a supermarket system they might have, but I'm not too familiar with the supermarket stuff. So for the most part, if I'm installing a crankcase pressure regulator, it's just a single valve. Okay, so let's see. Oh, okay. I see you guys are talking about the oil problems. Yeah, evaporator pressure regulators. Yeah, maybe on an evaporator pressure regulator on the rack systems. OR and ORD, that is correct, Ty. That would be the headmaster or head pressure control valves where you'd use them two in tandem. But the CROT valves is a crankcase pressure regulator is what it is. So, okay, what other questions did I miss out on here? Load calculation for a system. No, I didn't do a load calculation, Josh, but I talked about why we would do load calculations and how I would do a load calculation and how I would design a system. So I'll cover that again really quick, but we're going to wrap this up pretty soon after this. Would I replacing the headmaster for PM if the head is rusted? Yeah, Brad, that would probably be a good idea. No worries, Chris. Hopefully I answered your question, Chris. You can email me and I could talk to you some more. So, Fluke196, has YouTube changed my business? Hold on just a sec. Let's see. Josh. Wait, no, someone had asked me a question. I'm getting lost in here in the stuff here. Let me make sure. Okay, Josh J. If I addressed load calculation stuff in the beginning of this, and I don't want to kill everybody with covering that again. So if you don't get what you need out of watching the recap on this, then send me an email and I'll explain it some more. But I did address some load calculation stuff in here. So Fluke196, has YouTube changed my business? No, it hasn't changed my business. And I'm not, I mean, I've had a few people call me. I had like one restaurant chain call me asking me to come do work for them, but I can't take on any more work right now. So YouTube really hasn't changed my business per se. You know, and one thing I do want to address, the one thing that kind of irks me a little bit is, and I understand some people are just, they don't really think about it, but guys, I don't want to reveal my customers' locations in the videos. So oftentimes people will put comments in the videos saying, oh, I know that place. It's this restaurant. Whether it be right or wrong, for the most part, I delete those comments because I don't want to confirm or deny restaurant names, okay, guys, to protect my customers. Not that I'm doing anything wrong, because you guys can see in my videos, I'm not one to rip my customers off, but I do not want to reveal customer location names or anything like that. So if you guys happen to put that in a YouTube comment, typically it's going to get deleted, okay? So Fluke196, no, it really hasn't changed my business really much. So, okay, good. Thanks, Justin. When king valves leak, take out and replace with service valves. Is that cool? No, Israel, I typically put a king valve back in, but I don't like service valves. Service valves usually take an Allen wrench to adjust them, and I like king valves better. That's personal preference. So, adding 30 degrees to ambient temp for pressure, does that work for every refrigerant? No, sir. Tito 209, no, it does not. Especially with the new refrigeration and air conditioning equipment, you can't add 30 degrees. So basically, there's a rule of thumb, guys, an old rule of thumb, where we would take outdoor ambient temp, 100 degrees, and you would add 30 degrees to it, and theoretically, you know, in the way back in the days, that would be our liquid saturation temperature, so that would give you an idea what your head pressure should be. That is not the case anymore. Sometimes we may use a rule of thumb to get us by, to guess where our pressure should be. But you have to be careful about that, especially nowadays, because what is the name for that term? It's I can't think. There's a name, a moniker that I'm looking for right now. But the capacities of our equipment, condensers, the SEER ratings, everything is different now. So we oversize condensers, we oversize evaporators, we put smaller compressors in there, so everything changes. So that 30 degrees over ambient might have been somewhat accurate for like 6 to 8 SEER equipment in the 80s, okay? But it does not apply to equipment necessarily nowadays. Now, by working on a lot of refrigerators and different things, I tend to notice that, you know, hey, this particular brand, Delfield refrigerator may, you know, when it's charged correctly, typically you can use 20 degrees over ambient to kind of give you an idea where the head pressure may be, or different things. So, but that's something you got to kind of come to. The manufacturer is not going to tell you, you know, your head pressure, liquid saturation temperature should be this many degrees over ambient. What they'll tell you to do is recover the charge and weigh it in. So no, not necessarily 30 degrees over ambient. No way. Yeah, exactly. It's been out of date for 15 years plus. So, Dave SS, what's up, man? How you doing? All right. All right, guys, any more questions? Throw them in here. I'll try to get to them. Any more questions? Throw them in here. Let's see. I think I've got everything else. All right, gentlemen, I'm going to probably go ahead and end this because it's 6:22. So what's the best way for today's is just to weigh it in, Tito 209. Weigh it in and then pay attention to what it is after you've weighed it in. And then if you have a clean, there's a lot of factors and variables that go into that 30 degrees over ambient or whatever too. So, but yeah, just weigh in the charge. When the box is operating properly, you can pay attention to what your evaporator TD is and what your condensing unit liquid saturation temperature over ambient is, and you can kind of use that as a baseline for the next time you work on it. Yeah, no, Adam. It all depends on what you're working on. So microchannel condensers change everything. So it's super easy. You know, on a microchannel condenser, if you charge it to, let's just say that particular microchannel condenser runs 20 degrees over ambient. Okay. Who knows? But let's say it does. Well, if you change that, there's so many variables that go into there. If you accidentally do 21 degrees over ambient on that microchannel condenser, it might be overcharged now because microchannel condensers are so easy to overcharge. So really those rules of thumb kind of go out the door. They're kind of outdated. Have I worked on Heatcraft IntelliGen systems yet, Andrew? No, I have not. I tried to sell one, but I didn't get the customer. So I didn't get the job. So, all right, gents. I am going to go ahead and wrap this up. I really, really appreciate you guys coming in here. I'm going to go ahead and click my bumper music out. For anybody that has questions or things that I didn't answer, send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. Guys, I really, really want to say thank you for you guys, the amount of support you've been giving me. Pay attention. I've got that new video with my wife coming out on Wednesday for the second part of our How We Live the HVAC Life series. Would I die for truth? It says, would I place a cap tube in a suction line if you can't place it against it? I've never done that. I've heard of running a cap tube in a suction line, but I've never done it. So I can't really attest to that. So, all right, gentlemen, I am going to turn this on and go ahead and transition this out. If you guys don't mind, hit the thumbs up on the video on your way out, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Okay, I really appreciate it.